So I think everybody agrees that the current process is a mess. And there have been over the years a number of suggested changes or improvements or whatever. And I just want to get your thoughts. So, I mean, one idea that's been talked about sort of is that, Congress is never able to meet its deadline. It's like it always gets to September 30th and it can't pass all the bills. And they're saying, well, maybe Congress, if you just gave them more time. And so the idea would be, well, you would switch to a biennial budget process. So where you would every 2 years. So when Congress meets for 2 years, the first year they would pass appropriations for that year and the following year. And so you'd at least give them more time. And the idea is that if you funded all the programs for 2 years, and that would give you 1 year to maybe do some oversight, and Congress maybe doesn't do enough of that, and this would be a good idea. And of course, the other alternative is, well, we don't, the problem of not passing the bills is that you shut the government down. So the idea is that you would have a automatic CR. And so if the deadline approached and you hadn't passed all the bills, then a CR would just kick in automatically. And if and when you got the bills passed, then that would supersede the CR. So, I mean, both of those ideas have been kicked around at various times. And what are some of the sort of pluses and minuses of maybe adopting one of those or both of those as some sort of reform?
Sure. So in the case of the first one, biennial budgeting, I think here it's important to distinguish between the possibility of basically a biennial budget resolution versus a biennial appropriations bill. And I think there's a lot of merit in the current environment to a biennial budget resolution or some sort of vehicle that sets the overall discretionary spending levels for 2 years at a time. This is basically how Congress has operated for the last decade plus, since the passage of the Budget Control Act in 2011. We've basically lived in a world where Congress has reached a series of 2-year agreements on the overall spending levels. And while there's lots of things that have gone poorly about the appropriations process in that time, I actually think that has worked reasonably well. And so if we could get to a point where we were doing that on a predictable calendar, as opposed to just sort of on an ad hoc basis, I think there'd be a lot of merit to, again, making that sort of first big picture choice about how much are we going to spend on the defense side of the budget and how much are we going to spend on the non-defense side of the budget, and making those choices for 2 years at a time. I think a challenge of biennial appropriations bills is that you really lose you lose some flexibility, and you lose the ability of Congress on a regular basis to revisit its choices, revisit the needs of the country. Theoretically, you could have supplemental bills, so appropriations bills that occur outside the regular appropriations process. As we see right now, doing those it's not always a walk in the park either. We've had this ongoing debate about whether we're going to do a supplemental appropriations bill with assistance to Ukraine, to Israel, to Taiwan, and for border security for several months now, and that has presented its own challenge. And so I'm not sure that sort of relying on kind of supplemental additional appropriations to respond to changing needs is the best way to proceed. And your second question, which was about automatic continuing resolutions, I think that I certainly see the appeal. I think one challenge there is, especially if you are someone who thinks that the federal government should be spending less in terms of the discretionary budget, there's a real attraction to just letting things continue on autopilot. And Congress, for all of its strengths, is also a lot like a college freshman who does not act unless it has a deadline and an action forcing mechanism to do so. And so by creating an automatic continuing resolution, I think that would take away some of the sort of the energy that Congress needs to get things together in the form of a deadline. And you see different versions of the automatic CR proposal. Some of them sort of let operations continue at current levels for a period, and then there's a slight cut, again, to try and motivate Congress to get its act together. I think at the end of the day, the challenges here are political, and they're not, we can sort of tinker with the process, tweak the process to try to make it work better. But I think fundamentally, what the challenges of the budget process are symptoms of broader challenges in the legislative process that have to do with how far apart our parties are, this persistent period of narrow majorities, and the idea that both parties are always looking towards the next election with the thought that they could lose or gain the majority at any time, and that really sort of shapes their incentives for bipartisan cooperation.